out to Wisconsin Brewing Company Park tonight for another DockHaus.
It's our last DockHaus night of this 2024-2025 season. Thank you so much to everyone who has come out throughout this offseason. And before we get the show started tonight, we're joined by DockHounds manager Ken Huckaby. I wanted to thank the staff who has joined us here all offseason long. So Brian, part of our marketing team, he has helped me with the production side of DockHaus Dialogue with Dom Carter. He's our beverage coordinator, so he's required to be here every night, running the events, making sure that you all get everything taken care of. Our bartenders, tonight it's Sandy. Oftentimes it is also Julie, and then everybody downstairs as well. Lisa's normally here, and then Skipper Dave running the events. Just wanted to give a shout out to everybody else here with the Lake Country DockHounds, because this isn't just a one-man show, more than just a 30-minute talk show for me, but it's a big team here with the Lake Country DockHounds making it possible. And we're joined by Ken Huckaby tonight, DockHounds manager. Super excited to have you, Ken. It's got to be good to be back in Oconomowoc.
It is. We've been back here for about 3 weeks now, and it's, like I said, if you guys didn't have the winters you had here, we'd live here year-round.
Yeah, I've experienced that winter for the first time in my life, and I was told it was mild, and based on what I'd been told about previous winters, I believe it. But even then, it was still tough for a Californian like myself, which I know that you are as well, and you reside in Arizona, so you're used to that heat. And there's a lot of people from up here who go and live in Arizona for the winters, and understandably so.
I can totally get it. This is a winter day today in Arizona, so this is what you get in Arizona during the winter. It's today's weather.
It was rainy early, which obviously was not great, but 70 degrees this afternoon. It's certainly starting to become golf weather, which I'm very excited for. This next couple of week and a half where I can actually golf on a nightly basis before the season starts, and it's ramping up. It's got to be exciting for some of these players to start reporting. We talked about it in a little bit of a sneak peek, but spring training, it's such a special time. It starts a little bit later in the MLB partner leagues with the DockHounds, but even for these players to come here and know that baseball season's here, it's a surreal feeling every year.
It is. As a player, as an ex-player and a coach, as it gets closer, the excitement starts to build inside of you of what to expect, and not knowing what to expect is half the excitement in a player and a coach as you're getting ready to prepare for a season. And then when that day gets there, that first day, you want to kind of prove that you want to show that you did the work that you were supposed to do during the off season. And we try to re-emphasize to the players, hey, it's only the first day, go nice and easy, but they want to try and show you the work that they did on that very first day, which, if they didn't do that, then I'd say there's something wrong.
We can't wait to see what they're able to do on the field for the DockHounds. Year 4 of DockHounds baseball, building off of the franchise's first playoff appearance in its very short history. Let's go back to before your coaching career when you were a player, and you had 11 minor league seasons before you made your MLB debut. Also had to go to junior college before you were drafted to the Los Angeles Dodgers. How do you reflect on that experience from the minor leagues into making you the coach that you are today?
I think it's there's a direct correlation between the two because of, having to work so hard to achieve what I wanted to achieve in the realm of playing. It makes you have to learn, study, change, adapt, learn, and always be adjusting to what's going on around you instead of just staying one track and saying my way's the way. Because obviously if your way's the way, you'd be there. So you have to be able to adjust and turn. And I think as a coach, you have 25 guys in that clubhouse that all have different paths and different routes that they're taking, and you have to be able to identify, how I got to coach each different player a different way and talk to them in different ways. Some guys you can joke with, some guys you got to yell at, some guys, you got to make them feel a little bit better about themselves and pump them up a little bit. So I think being that and being an ex-catcher and having to deal with, a lot of pitchers and egos and things like that helped me for my journey as a coach.
2001, you get your call to Major League Baseball, and it's actually here in Wisconsin, formerly at Miller Park when you were with the Arizona Diamondbacks. You got to play one game for the eventual World Series champions. Do you remember anything about that day or about that process of getting called up and then getting into your first MLB game?
I do. The thing I remember is we clinched the West the night before, so we didn't leave the stadium in Milwaukee until like 4 a.m. because we had to wait for the San Francisco Giants game to be done on the West Coast, and they didn't get done. They played extra innings, so they didn't get done till like 1 or 2 a.m. Then when they lost, we clinched, then our celebration started, and we stayed there, and obviously, had a good time there. And then we had a 1:00 game the next day. So I remember showing up, being a little foggy-brained from the night before, and sitting in the dugout. And then about the sixth inning, Bob Brenly kind of said, "Hey, it's your turn to go." And the fun fact is that I was called up once before in my career, before 2001. I was called up in 1996 with the Dodgers and didn't play a game. Sat on the bench for the full month and watched Mike Piazza catch every game.
He was pretty good.
He was all right. And watched that. So I didn't get an at-bat, and I thought I'd be back. And then it took 5 more years for me to get back and actually get my career on track.
And was it those 5 years that really made it worth it in the end when you stuck around for the next 6 seasons in Major League Baseball?
It did, but I had to have a lot of support at home. I had to have, support from my wife and my son at the time. We didn't have my daughter yet, and I had to have support from home that I could continue to chase this dream and them be okay with that. And so it wasn't just me being able to chase my dream. There was more factors that went into it besides, and these players, and some of them are starting to have kids, and some of them are getting ready to have kids. And when you have a kid and you're playing, it becomes more than just a game and you chasing your dream. It becomes more of a, how do I support my family and make sure I can give them the life they deserve?
And it's not just your dream, it's your family's dream as well. So I'm glad you're able to touch on that. And through that dream, you played in 9 MLB organizations, which is pretty remarkable considering that there are only 30. So you had to deal with tons of coaches, different organizations, and how they treated you. And, of course, the way that minor leaguers are treated now is vastly different than when minor leaguers such as you were in their organizations. But what was one thing that stood out to you going organization to organization that you can now reflect to some of the players who may be hopping from team to team or getting released and then all of a sudden coming and playing for the DockHounds?
The one thing I take away from it, in all honesty, is that sometimes when you look at a player and he's hopped from team to team to team, you think he's a bad teammate, and that's why he can't stick in one city or one organization. You think he's a bad teammate, but from experience, it's not. It's a matter of supply and demand. At the end of the season, they didn't need me anymore, so they let me go. So what am I supposed to do? I got to go find another place to play and earn a paycheck. And so I've learned that not to. Sometimes that perspective is true about a guy's character, but a lot of times it's just a matter of they just didn't need him back for his specific role for the next season.
And then once your playing career came to an end, you actually played 2 seasons solely in the minors before you hung up the shoes. But then you become a coach with the Toronto Blue Jays organization. That was the MLB team that you played the most for in your career. You actually had 2 stints with Toronto. What was it about that organization that made you want to go to them and become a coach in?
Well, first of all, they were very generous to me with what they allowed me to achieve in my career and gave me the ability to play in the big leagues for parts of 3 seasons. And because that happened, I wanted Toronto to win the World Series again. I wanted them to win multiple World Series again. And I still kind of do in the back of my heart, still root for the Toronto Blue Jays to win World Series. When they asked me to come back and be a part of their organization, that was a way that I thought, okay, I can try and help this. And even though I started off as a hitting coach, which, I wasn't a real good hitter as a player, but it kind of got my foot in the door and got me going the direction I wanted to go. It was I'm very prideful, and being a guy who got drafted by the Dodgers and I played 8 years with the Dodgers organization, all in the minor leagues, except for the 1 month. I thought I would always be a Dodger guy, but I turned out to be more of a Blue Jay guy than I was a Dodger guy.
And from a guy who's up in Northern California, you may have not thought that growing up, maybe supporting the Giants a little bit.
Not one bit.
Yeah, well, you said something that stood out to me when I was wearing some of my Padres gear. If anyone who knows me knows that I wear my Padres gear very loud and
Too
proud.
much.
There we go. There's that. You said that my favorite team is the team that's paying me, and I'm like, all right, well, that's fair enough. And the Padres, they paid me a little bit last offseason, so I get
But what will happen to you, Dom, is the longer you stay in this game, you'll start developing relationships with different players, and you'll see them start to sprinkle themselves around baseball, and you find yourself rooting for the player more than you're rooting for the team.
I probably will end up having that. So that's why I'm really hoping the Padres can
get it done. Because you're, 19 now?
I'm 23 years old.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Ken Huckaby, everyone. So that you finally work your way, or I don't want to say finally.
Do they know that you sit behind me on the bus?
I think I've mentioned that a couple of times. I say it during the game. So when you're snoring on the bus, or I let Huck take the window side, and then I sit on the aisle side, so that way he can lean his seat back. But I still get the snoring, and I still finagle my way to find my way on the window.
There you go.
Because I'm a small kind of guy. Anyways, enough about us on the bus. But you become a minor league manager in 2015 in Lansing. How rewarding was it to be finally named a manager?
It was exciting. Like, I had like a laundry list a mile long of things I wanted to try to accomplish when I became a manager, and managers that I'd played for in the past that I wanted to emulate and be kind of like. And I was fortunate enough that first year in Lansing to be given by the organization a very talented team, and which a lot of the guys from that team went on to, they're still playing and have successful big league careers going on right now. And but I was excited, and it was everything I hoped it would be.
And you often see that catchers make good managers, or that catchers are often the position players who become managers because they have to think like a pitcher in addition to being a batter. Is that how you felt when you were being named manager? You were able to draw from calling games and handling pitching staffs while also batting to be a manager?
I think I drew from being a catcher on how to deal with different personalities. And I touched on that before. I think just the secret to being a good manager that I've learned from managers I've played for is just being able to deal with different personalities and learning how to talk to each player and knowing how to get the most out of each player. And I'm not there yet. I'm still working on it, but I've had some good teachers over the years.
You moved up from A-ball to high A, and the next season to manage. And then after only 2 seasons of managing, you got promoted, and this is a promotion, to being catcher coordinator of all minor leaguers in the Blue Jays organization. For you as a former catcher, and you didn't have the lengthiest MLB career, and you were also bouncing down from MLB to minor leagues. For you to be named the catching coordinator, how special was that?
It was huge.
Yeah.
It was huge. I remember the farm director called me and right at the beginning of the offseason, and we didn't have a catching coordinator at the time, and he asked me, hey, who are some good guys you know that would be good catching coordinators? And my answer was me to him. And he kind of laughed, and then I threw out some names of catching coordinators that I knew around baseball that I'd had, and left it at that. And then a couple weeks later, they called and said, you know what, we actually thought about it, and you probably might be the best person for the job here. And it was I had a lot of fun being the catching coordinator for those 3 years. I really did. And
you got to overlook some very good catchers who have made lengthy MLB careers: Alejandro Kirk, Danny Jansen, Reese McGuire, Gabriel Moreno, who's no longer with the Blue Jays, and then Riley Adams, who I actually went to high school with, so a little Canyon Crest.
Rich boy from Huntington Beach.
He's from San Diego, but yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
It's all the same once you get past the mountains down there.
That is very true. But those types of catchers, do you take good pride in seeing them put up results, kind of like what you were talking about, supporting players?
I take pride in watching them have really good, successful careers, and just knowing that not just myself, but the staff that was with the Blue Jays when I was there. You know, we had eight catching coaches at each affiliate that helped tutor these young men to what they're doing now, and to know that you just had a little bit of a sliver of influence into what they're doing in their careers, it's a huge honor. I mean, that's a lot of guys for a 3-year stint as a coordinator to have 6 guys in the big leagues having good careers.
And is that the basis of coaching, just to be able to impact younger players like you were able to get coaching advice from your coaches?
It is, and it goes back to what I said about, you know, our job as coaches. You know, yeah, it is to win baseball games, but ultimately our job is to make the players better. And if we're doing our job right, you saw in last year's team, if we do our job right, you see the team get better as the year is going on. But if all of a sudden you see the team shoot out and all of a sudden not doing good, then we're not doing our job in the clubhouse before the game, if the team is getting worse as the season goes on. So hopefully that doesn't happen this year, that the team gets worse. Because last year, I think Tom was running around talking about an undefeated season. We started off with like 2-10 last year, and then we made some good adjustments, brought in some good players, and made a real good run at the end.
I remember he and Jack calling me throughout the offseason, Dom, this team's going to be really good. And I have no reason not to believe them. And then I look at some of the players that we're bringing in, and I say, all right, I could see it. And then it didn't get off to the start that we wanted. But you all were able to right the ship and get things figured out, which is ultimately all that you can do. We've got one more pre-DockHounds question before we'll talk about the DockHounds. We're talking to our manager, Ken Huckaby, on DockHaus Dialogue with Dom. But in the end of the 2019 season, you were named the AAA manager for Buffalo. And then, as everybody knows, the pandemic comes in 2020 and affiliates get slashed. And then you ultimately didn't get to manage the AAA team, which was the stepping stone ultimately to the Toronto Blue Jays managerial position. Do you look back on it and just wonder what if with your coaching career, or are you just going with it and you're super happy to be here in Oconomowoc with the DockHounds?
You know what? It's funny because if I thought what if, I never would have continued on as a player with all the stuff, the ups and downs that come with the player. It was another turn in the road, of my career, and I can't look back on it and think, be upset about it or anything else. Obviously at the time you're upset when it happens, but I did have the opportunity during that 2020 COVID year to run the alternate site in Rochester while our team was playing in Buffalo. So a lot of the guys that were impacting the major leagues were coming through Rochester, and being able to run that program there and have it successful with the staff we had there was very fulfilling to me. And then just unfortunate that it didn't work out after that to be able to continue on with those players. But, the next year I ended up going to Mexico and experiencing Mexico culture with coaching and being a part of that, and then ultimately coming here to the DockHounds the next year.
2023, we're in May, the opening weeks of the season. DockHounds have a managerial change. It opens. Paul Wagner's the interim, and then you get your wife, Leslie, was actually the one who found the DockHounds opening. Do you want to share that story a little bit?
Well, what happened was I was sitting in my recliner, like most of us do when you don't have a job, and I'm watching TV, and my wife is in the kitchen. I don't know what she was doing, never do, and she still followed the DockHounds because my son Kyle, who's playing this year, was coming back this year. He was here, for the first year of the DockHounds, and so she still followed him on social media, and she said, "Hey, Lake Country fired their manager," and I was like, "Cool, okay." And she goes, "Do you want me to send your resume?" I'm like, "Sure, send my resume." So she goes into my email, which most wives have access to their husband's email, I think, and sends my resume into what I found out later was to Lisa Kelnick, not to Tom. Send it to Lisa. And then Lisa walks into Tom's office and says, "Hey, I got this resume from this baseball dad that wants to be the manager here." Because she knew who Kyle was, she thought I was just like some club ball coach that wanted to be the manager of the DockHounds after coaching club ball for my son for over the years, and didn't really look at at my resume a little bit. So Tom thought I was a baseball dad when he first read my resume. Then he looked at the resume and he called, and Tom called and said, we started talking, instantly hit it off. I think Tom and I are a lot alike, but different at the right places in how we are in our personalities. I think we're different in the right places, but we're a lot alike in our train of thought. And so I got off the phone with Tom after about 2.5 hours on the phone with him, and I told Leslie, my wife, I said, "Hey, listen, if we want to do this, I'm going to need to fly up to Wisconsin and take a look around and meet Tom and kind of see what it's going about." So we made a flight to come up here, for me to come up here, and then I called Tom and said, "Hey, I made a flight." And Tom, next words were, "Why don't you just stay?" I was like, "All right, I'll stay." And so came up here and stayed and met Paul Wagner and had Reggie Harris came in about the same time as I did as the other assistant coach. And we actually made a really good run that year too, till the last. We almost had carbon differences in finishes last year from 2 years ago on how we lost the 2 years ago and won last year. And, we should have been in the playoffs 2 years in a row right now.
100%. The team started 4-13 in 2023. And then I believe it was 39-27. I have it in my notes from 2023 season, and then finished 3-14, missed the playoffs. But then last year, the team was 21-32 when the roster started to overhaul itself a little bit, made a big trade for Jake Candleberry. He'll be back with the team this season, hopefully. And then John Duplantier also came in. A couple other, the young arms, including JT Miller, who's in the house tonight, just came up from Texas. So excited to get the gang back together a little bit. And
hold on a second. Demetrius Sims just walked in.
there he is. There's a shortstop for the DockHounds. And the funny thing you mentioned about Lisa glancing over your resume is that she clearly did that with mine when I got hired here too, and things turned out pretty well here too. I joke. I listen back to my tape sometimes, and I'm like, how on earth did I get this job? But we grow as we get the job, and here we are a couple years later, 2025, and you took over that team, and you really had to overhaul the roster in 2023. And you never had managed independent ball before. Was it what you expected coming in and having to recruit a lot of players and also manage that aspect of it, or was it what you expected?
It was more than what I expected. There was a lot I didn't know, which is why I enjoy it so much, because I'm still learning more and more each day. This for a lot of people that listen to this and see this doesn't work without Tom Kelnick and Jack Jennings. It doesn't work here. They do most of the groundwork on getting players and searching for players, and then I'm kind of like help them out with the finisher, trying to finish off the guys and get them here. And but it's a lot of work that goes into trying to get players and trying to get them to stay here and trying to get them to come back. It's a nonstop process trying to get these players here.
What was your initial impressions on the DockHounds when you got here? Of course, you mentioned that Kyle played on the inaugural team in 22, but when you get up here to Oconomowoc, what was your initial impression, not only of the DockHounds, but also the American Association?
I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know the caliber of baseball that I was walking into. I didn't know strategies on how I was going to manage games according to the talent ratio that was in the league. And it took a week or 2 or 3 to get that, but then it takes a little bit of time to instill the philosophy that I want my team to play under, to get that instilled into the players and get them playing under that philosophy.
And you were able to fully, I don't want to say fully establish that in 2024, but 2024 was your team. That was the team that you had the offseason to build, and you were able to be here in spring training. How different was it being able to have that off season and have the spring training to set the standards as opposed to 2023 and having to earn it on the fly with the squad?
Way more invested in the players that you bring in when you have the off season and you're going after the guys. Way more invested, and you give. This is where Tom and I differ in good ways. I have a longer leash because I think if we bring a guy in, it's a reason we bring the guy in. Whereas Tom is a little bit more business minded and says, "Hey, we need to make a change now," and I have a little bit more of give me a chance to make this guy better. We saw something in him, that's why we brought him here. Let's try and make him better. But I think there's times when Tom's right and there's times when I'm right, and I think that's why the relationship works.
And then Jack is somewhere in the middle of that?
Jack is just doing everything behind the scenes and bringing names and causing chaos in Tom's life.
I've lived with Jack for the last 7 months, so it's been great to kind of see the process behind it, because he's telling me all this information before games about, we're looking at this player to maybe come here in a month. And I'm like, that's great, dude. Like, I've got a game I got to go broadcast tonight and then tomorrow and then the next day. And so he feeds me all this information, and I'm like, that's cool. Like, I'll have to remember that. And the story I actually told on the air was about JT Miller, because he showed me his changeup about a month before we signed him. And then we're at Franklin Field, and he throws the changeup. And I'm like, this is the changeup that I was shown a month ago. So they're working really hard behind the scenes to make sure the DockHounds are the best they can be on the field. And that's why they were able to overcome that 21-32, I don't want to say deficit, but hole. The DockHounds were 8 games out of the playoffs last year, able to make it with 2 games left. What was the key in that?
You know what? We tell the players, it's not my job. It's not Paul Wagner's job. It's not Dave Pano's job to create the culture that we want here in Oconomowoc and Lake Country. it's our job as staff to give the players the room to create the culture that they want to have. And so what we do is step back, let them create the culture, and then our job is to kind of guide that culture the direction that we want it to go. And I think that's what happened last year is right at the very beginning. I think our biggest problem last year is that we just could not throw strikes for the first month and a half of the season. And it put us in a deficit. Our offense was still there, as it probably will be this year, but we have to be able to throw strikes and attack hitters and get hitters out.
And you mentioned Dave Pano. You coached with him in the Blue Jays organization. He obviously was not here in 2023 when you weren't here to begin the season. He came up for a homestand during that 2023 season in the stretch run, but you brought him in to be a part of the coaching staff. How important is he to what goes on here in Lake Country? He
is a huge part of what's happening here. Is Dave is a guy that's been in professional baseball for a long time, and as a coach, never played obviously at 5'2". What is he, 5'2"?
On a good day.
5'2", and he's like 80 years old now. Yeah. No, he's not. But I always admired Dave's work ethic when I was with the Blue Jays, and he was one of the 8 catching coaches. He stepped up when we didn't have a catching guy in Vancouver one year and said he would do the catching, and he stepped up and did it. And I just loved the way he focused on stuff and attacked stuff. And if you ever talk to a player that's played with Dave Pano and he's been their hitting coach, they love him beyond belief. And that's what I wanted here. I wanted our hitters to have someone that they trusted, that when they showed up here at the park, they knew he was already going to be here and waiting for him in the cage and ready to work. My first year here and talking with other guys that have played independent ball before, that's not necessarily the case in independent ball. The hitting coaches aren't always in the cages with their players. But I'm used to that being an affiliate, that the hitting coach is an integral part. And the same thing with Wags being a part of the pitching staff. You have to be present at all times for them and not just let them do the work on their own and expect them to succeed. Our goal here in Lake Country is to get these players signed and to get them on to the big leagues where they can actually make some money in their lives and build their careers. So Dave Pano was a huge part of what we're doing here.
And you've already been able to get a couple of players into MILB, including one up to the major leagues with Austin Davis. How fulfilling is it when you take over this job, with that being the goal, to see that happening so quickly?
It's cool, and you know instantly when you see the players that come through here. You're like, we're fortunate this year to have the college kids that we signed last year coming back, and these kids didn't get drafted, so they haven't gotten that opportunity yet. And our goal is to get them that opportunity. But to see the guys that have been in organized ball come here trying to resurrect their careers and then do it, it's very fulfilling. Even though they've had the talent the whole time, they just needed the opportunity.
Expectations for this 2025 season, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of players returning from last season, players that you brought in, every single one of them, and there's a lot of newcomers, and with the affiliate cuts, keep on coming, there's a lot of talent on this roster, at least from what I'm told by Jack and Tom.
My expectation is just to be consistent. It's not to come out blazing and be, at the end of 20 games, the first 20 games, being 17-3. I look at the season as we play 100 games. We're going to win 40. We're going to lose 40. That's just a guarantee, right? So it's what we do with those other 20 games over the course of the season that make the difference in our season. So if we can just be consistent every day we play and keep a level head and not get too emotional over what's going on, there's always we found out last year, there's always ways to dig yourselves out, and there's always ways to make yourself better at the end if you got everything pushing in the right direction.
And there was one thing that stuck out to me that you told me, and it may have been something that you were telling somebody else on the bus, but I was, of course, sitting right behind you, and I heard you talking about it.
Were you drinking Fireball that night?
I possibly. If that was the case, then it would have been early in the season, because I stopped doing that once I was like, all right, I've had enough of Fireball. But you said the teams that win the championship are the teams that get off to a good start and they're able to just coast into the playoffs and then really recalibrate going into the stretch. And the DockHounds, based on their start, didn't have the chance to do that. They got into the playoffs and faced the team that kind of did that, the Kane County Cougars, because they, I don't want to say stalled, but played 500 baseball for the last 40-ish games and then got red hot in the playoffs. But how does it fuel you knowing that the team was able to get to the playoffs last year but didn't succeed in the end?
Well, it's funny because if you don't learn something from what happened last year, then we're not accomplishing anything. So what I learned last year was we clinched with like 3 games left? Two games left. Well, we knew we had the pitching, and the pitching was really good, and we knew we had the offense. But what happened was and I'm not saying they all did it, but we allowed as a staff for our offense to take 2 mental days of a break from preparing for the games that we played against Milwaukee for the last 2 games. We didn't have our pregame interview or meetings that we go over the starting pitchers and go over who's available in their bullpen and do the things that you need to do to prepare. So we let them have a 2-day break mentally, and then all of a sudden expected them to turn it on when the playoffs started. Well, now I've learned we can't allow that break to happen. We have to stay on top of everything even as the season's winding down with the guys and not allow them to have that mental break, because in a short series, every run matters, and you saw that against Kane County where we lost 2 of the 3 games by 1 run, or both games. Or we lost 1 game by 3 runs and 1 game.
But the elimination game, it was 1-0.
Yeah.
And it was a cold night, and you just kind of knew if you don't score first, it's one of those games where you're really behind the 8 ball, and that's just the way that it ended up being. And it was also a tough situation because guys hadn't had days off, like Taberry or Sims and Altman, who played all 100, and you wanted to give them a little bit of a breather, and it just didn't work out in the end. But that's the name of the game.
It is, and you ask your main guys to do a lot, and so this year the message coming into Sunday when I meet with all the guys is we're preparing to play 115 games this year. We're not preparing to play 100, and we're not going to take any one of those 115 games off this year. We're gonna play them all the way through to the end and finish this thing off in the right way.
And there's one thing that I noticed about the schedule this year that we didn't have the last 2 years is that we don't go to Winnipeg, and every team, you only play 5 teams on the road and then 5 teams at home from the opposing division. So some of the jokes that I've been making to Sims as he's been here a lot is that our trip to Winnipeg is in September, and that would mean the DockHounds are
in the
championship, and I'm sure that's something that the team can strive for. Of course, you can't choose who you play in the championship, but strive to play in late September.
Exactly right. So, like I said, if we have to play Winnipeg in September, I'm completely fine with that. Wags will try and find a flight, and I'll make him ride the bus.
Well, and it's nice to not have that bus ride after it was a tough bus schedule last year. It's a little bit better, especially in terms of mileage this season. So maybe that'll help the DockHounds get off to a better start. Thank you so much for joining me, Ken, tonight. I really hope that our fans enjoyed your perspective, also getting to learn a little bit more about your career and also, see a little bit what goes into the mind of our manager.
I hope so, too.
Thanks.
It's not very much.
Thanks, and hope you all can stick around for Bingo with Skipper Dave. And thank you to everyone once again for coming out to DockHaus Dialogue with Dom all off season. My favorite 2 hours of the week, because it's cold, and I enjoy broadcasting. So hope you enjoyed the shows as well. Can't wait to talk to you again on FanFest. That is next Saturday, 5 to 9 p.m. It'll be free for all fans. We'll talk to some of the players as well. And then the season's coming around shortly. We've got May 9th opening day in Chicago. Home opener May 16th against the Fargo Moorhead Red Hawks. Thanks again.